I can intro you. Hey everyone, we're up for our next session. We have Regan from Opyn, and she'll be doing a talk on Squeeth with me. And I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, my name's Regan, and I'm super excited to be here today. Sorry for the slight tech issue where you'll be seeing my whole screen, but hopefully the slides are pretty enough where you'll still want to watch. Firstly, I just want to give a huge thank you to DeFi Discussions for inviting me to speak today. I am so thrilled to be presenting on behalf of Opyn about one of our incredible products called Squeeth. So this is just a little bit more about me. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Regan, and I just really recently joined the Opyn team in May of 2022. And I enjoy learning about everything DeFi. I also post an ungodly amount on Twitter, and I really love to hike. So kind of getting into the crux of it, I also want to mention why I joined Opyn, because I think they just have an incredible mission. Opyn was founded by 3 Berkeley students a few years ago, and essentially they have the goal of empowering others through an inclusive, fair, and open financial system. We have built and are continuing to build DeFi native derivatives and options infrastructure in DeFi. Today, I'll be focusing on our product called Squeeth, which stands for Squared ETH. And on the highest level, a 1-sentence summary of Squeeth is that it's an index which tracks the price of ETH raised to the power of 2. But I really think that that definition minimizes the power of squeething. And so I would love to kind of dive into it, and you all can squeeth with me. I think I want to take a step back and start from the beginning by explaining what an option is. An option contract offers the buyer the right to buy or sell an option, an underlying for a specific price, at a strike price at a certain time, the expiry. So each contract will have a couple of components, such as the expiration date by which the holder must exercise their option. The contract will also have the stated price, which I mentioned is known as the strike price. And most importantly, the optionality is not free, so buyers have to pay a premium to option sellers. So I think it's best if we ground this with an example. Let's just quickly go over this. Let's say the price of ETH today is $1,111. I have not checked the price of ETH today. I think it was like around, hopefully it's still around there, not lower. But you're super bullish on ETH, and you think that ETH within the next 30 days is just going to skyrocket. It's going to launch. So you decide that you want to purchase a call option, which means the right to buy on ETH. And let's say this call costs you $100. That's the premium. So what does any of that actually mean? Well, let's say ETH goes beyond 2,000. Let's say ETH goes to like 3,000. You'd have the right to buy ETH from the seller for the price of 2,000. And that payoff is represented by the top chart. You may ask, like, why would someone want to sell these things? And I mean, honestly, it's a pretty great way to collect premiums, and we would assume that this person's a bit more bearish on ETH, and so their payoff is actually represented by the bottom graph. And I also want to just quickly touch on convexity, because that's really just important to the options market in general. And so really, when we talk about convexity in options, we're talking about non-linear returns. The buyer of this call option here is buying optionality. They're purchasing convexity. And another great way to put that is limited downside with unlimited upside, which is essentially non-linear. But as great as options are, they come with some risks and some issues. The first risk is, let's talk about expiries. If we take our last example, the call option will eventually expire, and that means you now have no options exposure, aka no convexity. So let's say you want to roll that position. ETH's not bull running. You decide, I want to roll it for another month. So you could sell this call and then buy another. But this is cumbersome. You could misclick, you could forget, and then leave your position completely unhedged. So it's not ideal, for lack of better terms. The second issue is also, let's say, managing strikes. Price movements make your option more or less valuable, and therefore large price swings affect your level of convexity. And every time you want to change your strike, you'd have to buy another option, which is also very costly and cumbersome. And so liquidity fragmentation is listed at the top because I think that both strikes and expiries, these combos, right? There has to be a seller on the other side. You are buying a strike and expiry combo as an option, and there needs to be someone selling that to you. This really fragments the liquidity in an options market for a particular asset, in this case, ETH. And so the reason why that's not so good is because that makes just the options market in general prone to slippage and even just higher costs, because when there's fragmented liquidity, they're able to raise the prices. And that's not something that a buyer would really want. But there are some solutions. For those of you who know a bit about DeFi and DeFi options, there's something called perps introduced by BitMEX in, I think, 2016. And these are really interesting because they essentially solve the fragmentation and management overhead of expiries in the futures market, which is similar to the options market, but it's obligatory. And typically with commodities, we see it a lot. And so the components of the perp are a bit different than an option. We just spoke about those three components of an option that you'll typically see in a contract. On the right, this is a cartoon from Dave White. He works at Paradigm. His cartoon guide to perps, I recommend everyone reads it. It was super fundamental in my understanding of DeFi options. But essentially, we have the mark price, which is the value of the perp at any given time. And the value of the underlier is represented by the index price. And that little spread between them, where the mark and index price diverge, that is essentially the system transfers a funding fee to those who are long the perp to those who are short. You can think of that a bit as a premium. And as well, all traders must put down collateral, which is known as margin. And so if the margin gets too low, a trader will be liquidated. And in this case, with perp swaps, both longs and shorts can be liquidated. Now, everlasting options do the exact same thing, but for the options market. However, everlasting options are still vulnerable to the function of price movement. Again, when we speak about wanting a constant convexity, constant exposure to gamma, we are speaking about the fact that when price swings move tremendously in the options market, you are not getting the same exposure that you may have initially wanted or that you were buying for. And so while everlasting options as a product idea are really interesting, DeFi was still lacking a product idea that allowed users to maintain a constant convexity despite price fluctuations. So finally, without further ado, we get into Squeeth. Squeeth is a power perpetual that tracks the price of ETH squared. It solves the issues of both strikes, expiries, and liquidity fragmentation. The power perpetual was actually founded by the Opyn team and Paradigm researchers. And this power perpetual in specific is Squeeth, which is the endearing name for squared ETH. And the reason why Squeeth is super interesting is because it's actually an ERC20 token that tracks the price of ETH raised to the power of 2. So traders can go long or short ETH by buying or selling Squeeth based on the difference between the mark and index price. So traders take on various options like exposures with the Squeeth token. And let's investigate how that works. But also, I think that little visual on the side is very helpful. We'll talk about what it means to be long Squeeth, but you can kind of see that curvy payoff. That is convexity. And this is typically what people are looking for when they're purchasing options. And I'll also give that some grounding against 2x leverage. But this is just an interesting chart to look at about liquidations, payments, and the idea of perpetuals. So all the ways to Squeeth, long. This is probably, when I was even learning about Squeeth myself, what I thought Squeeth was. I think I didn't really understand it as something that you can take on various forms that should be used as an instrument for optionality and convexity. And that's why I think when you just know the definition, it's a token that tracks the price of ETH raised to the power of 2, that tracks its index, is really, it's not enough, because I think it only leads to really understanding the long form. But to quickly go over this long form, long Squeeth is Squeeth in its purest form. It gives traders a leverage position with unlimited ETH squared upside, protected downside, and no liquidations. And so something great is that long Squeeth offers pure convexity with the ETH squared payoff, giving it a more favorable payoff than 2x leverage. So compared to a 2x leverage position, Squeeth will make more when ETH goes up and lose less when ETH goes down. But funding rates are expected to be higher due to the exposure to pure convexity. You're paying for the right to have this more uncapped and higher upside. And instead of this upfront premium that we talked about earlier with our ETH example, the Squeeth token has an embedded funding mechanism that long Squeeth holders pay for the position. And the reason why long Squeeth holders don't get liquidated is because the in-kind funding is paid in Squeeth itself. So it can just be an ERC20 token. And that means longs don't have to deal with posting margin and risking liquidation. So what are the best times? When should you long Squeeth? The best times are when you're super bullish on ETH in the short to medium term. And we say short to medium term because funding is not cheap. Buying this optionality, buying this convexity is not cheap, but could be very worth it if you believe that ETH will really rally. However, it's also important to note that the way our funding mechanism is determined, which we have lots of papers on, also relies on something called implied volatility. And so implied volatility is a future-looking metric that's really essentially trying to understand it's not guaranteed, it's trying to gauge what the volatility option market will be. And so it's better to buy Squeeth when Squeeth is low volatility, because that means that it's less pricey relative to other options. So if the implied volatility is really high, that means Squeeth's not priced very fairly. When it's lower, like around 85%, that means Squeeth is priced fairly and not too expensive relative to the options market. Oh, sorry. My friend was leaving notes for me. Okay, so short Squeeth. Short Squeeth is a short ETH square position. So essentially collateralized with ETH. Traders earn a funding rate for taking on this position paid by long Squeeth holders. Short Squeeth positions can be liquidated though. So a user's exposure to the price of ETH depends on the amount of collateral that they have deposited, as well as if they own the collateral or if they had borrowed it with stablecoins elsewhere. The best time to short Squeeth is when the market is overpricing volatility and ETH is trading sideways, like in a crab market. And that actually really sets up something that we have called our crab vault, which is this automated delta neutral strategy that allows people to sell Squeeth, and it's unlikely to be liquidated because it rebalances. And we also have a lot of great resources on that, which I'll be talking about more towards the end. And even more excitingly, we're going to be having Crab V2 very soon, which will be raising the crab caps so that more people are able to participate and sell Squeeth. Buy and LP. I actually just wrote an article about this, which I will probably be plugging at the end. But there are two ways to LP, liquidity provide, on Uniswap. And so the two choices are buy an LP and mint an LP. And the choice between those really depends on your views of funding, ETH price trajectory, and whether you want convex or concave exposure. So let's just start with buy an LP. A full range buy an LP position is similar to an ETH to the 1.5 payoff. Andrew Leone, one of our Opyn researchers, refers to this as Squeeth Light. And the reason why it's Squeeth Light, this is also, by the way, excluding funding and trading fees, just when you look at it, like naturally it is ETH to the 1.5. When you look at it, what's great about it is, okay, you're a bit less bullish maybe than someone who's longing Squeeth, but because of that, you get a little less in exposure, but it also means you are paying less in funding than someone who is holding long Squeeth. The risks of this are pretty similar to any other token pair, such as slippage and the threat of impermanent loss. So if you're less familiar with how Uniswap works, they have some great docs on what impermanent loss really means. But I would also mention with Squeeth, it's important to be mindful of funding, because the buy-in LPs will be paying funding on whatever part of their position that is long Squeeth. So you want the ETH price appreciation to outweigh the cost of funding. But it still can be really cool. And we have some awesome people who buy an LP. And then lastly, there's mint and LP. Mint and LP is really interesting because you are essentially minting Squeeth from the Squeeth vault, and this really acts as a hedge of ETH. Mint an LP is less bullish than buy an LP. Again, you are paying less funding because when you put on the position, you're actually neutral funding at first. What you mint with the ETH combined for the Squeeth ETH pair, you'll be neutral in the initially. But as the price of Squeeth goes down, you'll have to start paying funding, and then vice versa. You can start receiving it if Squeeth goes up. So you generally want modest price appreciation of ETH and large trading volumes, as you would want with any LP pair to get those fees from trading. And so mint and LPs, again, can be positively impacted by funding when the price of Squeeth goes up, because then they're selling the Squeeth token. This is really just because the TLDR of impermanent loss is an LP will always be left with the lesser performing token, more of it, because people are swapping across the pair. But I promise you, Uniswap explains that better than me. So if you are less familiar with it, you should look at the Uniswap docs. So some resources to learn more is Everlasting Options paper by Paradigm, and really anything by Paradigm is really well done. But they particularly did a lot of great work when talking about Everlasting Options, and also they collabed with the Opyn team to talk about power perpetuals. And then also our Medium is a really great place where you should be able to find a bunch of our great articles that go into way more detail than I could give about all of these things. We have a really great marketing team, and I've been really fortunate to be a part of it for this past month, and I've learned so much. And so this is just some other ways to keep up with us. We're on Twitter. We also, if you're interested in learning more about Squeeth, I highly recommend checking out our website, or even just coming and vibing with us in the Discord. We're always there for any type of questions, and we always love chatting with people about all things DeFi, Squeeth related, Opyn related, really anything. So it was incredibly humbling to be able to present about Squeeth, and I'm still learning about it myself, but I think it's an incredible product. And so I really hope that I get to speak with some of you, learn more from some of you. And again, thank you to DeFi Discussions for having me here today.
Awesome. This was great. Thank you so much. We're going to transition to our next session now.
Great.
All right. And we're going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey everyone, we have Sunny, Julian, and Zaki here, and they'll be talking about DeFi today. And I think Zaki is reconnecting. He's back.